Welcome back to another episode of Gangland Wire True Crime Stories.
This is your host, Gary Jenkins, along with Aaron Gnurk here. Welcome back to hear a little more about the bumbling Sparrow Gang. You know, we're sitting here in the deep, dark confines of Studio 4, the home studio for the Big Dumb Fun Show. My friend, producer, and co-host, Aaron Gnurk is here. Say hello, Aaron.
Hello, Aaron.
You know, if you like to hear independent musicians from all over the United States and keep up on local and national independent music and the film scene, visit www.bigdumbfunshow.com and listen to Aaron. He has some fine stuff. You know, I just found out that Aaron receives and plays music created by musicians looking for any kind of a venue, and he gets these from all over the United States. So listen in. Sometimes he even has bands come in and perform here on the set, and he interviews them. So tune in and listen to some original cutting-edge stuff, and maybe you'll help discover the next Miranda Lambert or Kelly Clarkson. Who knows? That's the www.bigdumbfunshow.com. And if you want to learn a little more about the Mafia, go to www.ganglandwire.com. I'm getting my dots mixed up.
Ganglandwire.com.
Ganglandwire.com.
You can actually order the video, the DVD, if you will, for Gangland Wire, the documentary that Gary Jenkins produced. Also, you've got an app out.
I've got an app, the Kansas City Mob Tour app. Go to the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store and type in the search mechanism, Kansas City Mob Tour. I created an app that will take you to every location in the city. Well, not all of them, because I'm going to add some more and maybe change some, and I'll add some over the next year or two as I see fit. And you can go to see where local mobsters from the 20s to the present day lived, loved, ate, drank, fought,
and laundered money.
And laundered money, yes. Make some recommendations on restaurants. And, you know, one of those restaurants, and I won't say which one, but one of them, I walked in there one time to eat with my wife, actually, and there was a big round table in the middle of it. It's an Italian restaurant, and every mob bookie that I knew in the city was sitting around that table eating and having a merry old time. So
now, did they know you?
They didn't know me. You know, I worked in the background, in the shadows, shall we say. There was maybe one or two people might have put my face to the face of my face as a policeman, but most of them didn't, and because we just stayed in the background. We're in the intelligence unit.
You were in plain clothes.
Plain clothes, and we followed them around, and we did a variety of different things. We developed informants, but we never really, you know, with the Mafia, there's very few people have ever really worked in undercover where they were actually known
by the individuals that they were. By the
individual mob guys. It's just, and Kansas City's too small. Now, they did it. Donnie Brasco did it in New York City. And I think there's another guy, Jack Falcone, wrote a book about his exploits, just like Brasco did. And actually, Brasco, Joe Pistone was his real name. His fake name was Donnie Brasco. But anyhow, it was a great movie, too, by the way. Those are real deal mobsters, and he really worked his way in, but you can't do that in Kansas City. It's too small a town. You might do it in New York City, but not in Kansas City. So, because mob guys are not going to let you in. We tried it. I remember.
Well, you're not Italian.
I'm not Italian, no, and I couldn't even really fit in as some kind of professional criminal that would do things for them. You know, we had a guy that tried it. We kind of dirtied him up a little bit, and he knew where a mob guy, a guy named Willie Comisano Jr., was showing up quite often, and it was a semi-public place. It was a car cleanup and detail shop, and so this guy went in and he had his car detailed. Our undercover officer, he went in, had his car detailed, and he kind of got friendly, and he gave some fishing tackle, the brand new fishing tackle. We just went out and bought a bunch of fishing tackle, really nice stuff, and he had a trunk load of it, and he indicated that he was boosting this stuff. Boosting means shoplifting, by the way, or he had a inside contact that could steal it off of a dock at something like Bass Pro, but there wasn't a Bass Pro at the time, but
There's all this in the packaging,
Cabela's
new
or something like
fishing
that, all
equipment.
brand new stuff in the packaging, and he had a trunk load of it. And
Basically said he's a booster.
Right. He gave some of it to the employees there, and they liked him for that. And so he came back and shot the shit with them, and he sold some stuff to them real cheap. And finally, about the third time he was in there, Willie Campesano Jr. shows up, and so they're all talking about fishing and hunting, and because the guy's a big fisherman and a hunter. And
is that why they chose that?
Right, because they knew he was going to be there, and they knew he was
big into fishing and hunting.
Right, and so our undercover tried to give him some of this stuff, and he really didn't want it. And so then the next time he was in, and Willie was in there, then he tried to sell it to him for a really low price, and he just refused it. And so those guys did not fall off the turnip truck yesterday, as I said before. They are canny and smart, and they do not deal with people that they don't know a lot about. And so you got to create years and years of history. There was a long-term operation that I know of in the city back in those days that did get a guy in, and it was the IRS, and they got a guy, and they did a long-term operation. They first put him on a suburban police department. I won't say which one, but the agent told me, he said, yeah, we dirtied him up by putting him on this particular police department. And they've cleaned up their act since then, but back then they were a little bit shaky in many areas, and so they put him on this police department, and then he started hanging out over in a mafia-owned club. Butch Savella, the nephew of Carl Savella, owned a club called Hubie Q's, or Mothers. They changed the name to Mothers, or Mothers to Hubie Q's, I can't remember which, and out about 50th and Main, and it was a disco, and this guy got a job on the door as a doorman, and he had since been fired from oops, I got to cut that out. Damn it. I can do that. He had since been fired from this local suburban police department, and he ended up, he hung out there enough and let him know he was kind of on the line, on the border, kind of a cop, and so they hired him as a doorman, and he ended up kind of being a part-time manager of the place, so he got access to everything in the place, and he copied all the accounting books and gave them to the IRS, and you know what was interesting about that story? This is like a 4-year investigation. And in the end, the best they could do was say that he had not been declaring all the income from the cover charges. They were charging like $2 or $3 cover charge on certain nights, and it was. And
they said they didn't match up with the
didn't
attendance.
match up. It was a few $100 a week that they were not turning in. Well, heck, a lot of people don't turn in those little bits of cash money they get. Lots of businesses do that.
Now, this other police officer who they kind of dirtied up, and so the people, the local mob, if you will, they knew that he was dirty, and so they hired him as a doorman. And
right, but they didn't let him in.
Because he was still he's still a Peckerwood.
He's still a Peckerwood, and he's still unknown. He had been hanging out there for several years, and they knew he'd gotten trouble on this police department, and supposedly got fired. But they'd never let him in. He did have access to everything, but that's the best he could come up with, is they hadn't been reporting these small amounts of cover charge. So that's that was the only real. We had another one where they leased a restaurant right next to the FBI for 2 years. They leased this restaurant and ran it right next door to the Northview Social Club, where all the mob guys hung out. It was a small social club where they all drank coffee and played cards and hung out in front and smoked cigarettes in their Sansabelt slacks and polo shirts and joked and you've seen those surveillance shots of those guys, usually big fat middle-aged guys standing around talking and wearing leather coats but they would never ever talk to these guys run this restaurant because they didn't know them, and I know they had put them in with some professional criminals, probably who were snitches. And kind of dirtied them up a little bit, but they just won't talk to you. It's too small a town; you can't get it done. So
they weren't worried about them trying to bug the social club from right next door?
Well, I mean, you didn't. No, if you wanted to bug the social club, here's how you do that: you just go over there at 4:00 in the morning and pick the lock, go in and plant the bugs, and go on. Because there was no alarms, there was no cameras back then. You just go in and do it.
Yeah.
So they just kind of assumed it might be bugged, and if you want to do the telephone, you do that down at the Southwestern Bell office. You didn't climb a pole outside the social club. And they did bug the social club. It never really panned out. There's too much noise, and they never really said anything inside. If they wanted to talk business, they would just go outside and walk up and down the street. We had one time at Willie Comisano's little headquarters. It was a little garage, and they weren't talking inside, and so they watched them. They'd always walk up close to this post and talk. Somebody'd show up, and he'd walk away and take one person at a time, and they'd stand by this one light post and talk. So they hit a mic at this light post, but guess what? It wasn't hidden well enough, and they found it real quick. But, you just keep trying. You just got to keep trying. You throw stuff up against the wall and see what sticks and what works.
Well, these guys know they're being watched.
They know they're being watched.
They know there's people trying to listen to them.
Right. So they're smart, they're canny, they're careful, but they were never careful enough. When we put the hidden microphone into the lawyer's office where they were using, we got them there. When we put the hidden microphone in a house up north of the river, we got them there. So you just keep trying it, and see what works. One time they put one hidden microphone in the house, and the guys went in the bedroom and talked, and the Bureau had asked the U.S. Attorney to include the bedroom in as part of what can be bugged. And at the time, there were two rooms that were the government regulations were, and these are just regulations, it wasn't a law, that you could not bug a bathroom or a bedroom in these days. And
just too personal.
Too personal. And so they went in the bedroom and talked, and they missed a really good meeting of some high-level people that came in from out of town. But that's the breaks of the game. But back to this, let's catch back up. Carl and Joe Spiro are on this vendetta to kill the kill the Savellas, and the Savella family, via Tuffy DeLuna, are plotting to try to kill Carl and Joe Spiro. And Carl, particularly, as being the kind of the strong personality, has recruited several non-Italians or Peckerwoods to be part of his crew, and he's recruited this Lyle Neal, who's a career criminal, and he has assigned him to work with his brother Joe Spiro as part of his crew. Now Carl stays away because he knows too many people get to know him, and too close to him, they could end up getting popped and testify against him. So he maintains some distance from these guys, and Joe Spiro is like the underboss, and he has to deal with these street guys like Lyle Neal. But Lyle Neal is also a snitch to J.D. Johnson, and now Clark Hamilton has been assigned to be his control. Lyle Neal realizes he's in over his head, and he's with a group of folks that are driven more by their passion for revenge than really to increase their criminal business interests. Now, they say they want to take over these pieces of action,
the book,
sports gambling,
the
book, and stolen property interest, but they're really driven by revenge and passion. And Joe Spiro, by this time, just like some two-bit gangbanger, he tried to drive by shooting Tuffy DeLuna and missed him, but he thought it was funny just to see the look on Tuffy's face. By now, the Spiros know that Tuffy DeLuna was the leader of the raid on the Virginia Tavern. They really want Tuffy bad, and their brother Mike had been killed there, if you remember. And during all this time, the FBI is mounting an all-out offensive against the Savella faction for skimming from Las Vegas casinos. And so they're like, the FBI is split. And really, the Kansas City Police and the White Collar Crime Unit and the ATF, because there's a bomb involved, end up taking on the Joe Spiro plot to kill Tuffy DeLuna. And actually, an interesting story on that is at this same time, the FBI has uncovered two dirty agents who are not connected to the mob, but they are facilitating thefts from interstate shipments with a couple other professional criminals that nobody really knew much about except the FBI. So the supervisor of the organized crime squad has three things going. He's got the skim operation, he's got the kind of keeping up on the Spiro-Savella gang war, and he's also got a secret operation going and a secret wiretap going at an off-site location on these two FBI agents. And one of the FBI agents actually is assigned with us working on the Spiros. So it was quite a time.
Well, how would that work in terms of the agent? I guess they weren't a clean agent, so they were doing stuff on the side. But because they were doing it on the side, they were doing it with the Spiros.
No,
they were doing it
other
with
professional criminals. They had a couple of guys who were stealing from boxcars, train tracks. They had some inside information
that they could know what the shipments were,
right? And they were
so
stealing,
they know which boxcar to hit,
right? And so the two FBI agents were facilitating, connecting them up with fences to sell this stuff, and covering for them if they got in any trouble, and taking a little piece of the action. And one of them ended up committing suicide. And the other one, I actually worked with him following Carl Spiro around one night, and he was a crappy agent. It was his fault that we lost him one night just because he was lazy and probably fell asleep. But because they didn't really have anything, they didn't have any connection to the Spiros. They had other connections, but the supervisor of the organized crime squad, Gary Hart, he had all these things going. He had a lot of balls he was juggling, and the U.S. Attorney David Helfrey was juggling these balls with him. So it was a pretty interesting time. I didn't know any of this at the time. I was just a low-level intelligence guy out following people around and trying to talk to my own sources. It's a huge, big operation in which there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people, and only a few people know everything that's going on, and they only need to know a few people need to know everything that's going on. I didn't need to know any of this other stuff, especially about the rotten agents. And one of them's name was Rotten, Rotten, R-O-T-T-E-N. Isn't that there's a word for that, and I can't think what it is. Ironic, isn't that ironic? So anyhow, we got all this going on, and they're working on the skim, and we're working on the Spiros and the agents, the rotten agents, the bad agents, and on this skim, I'll tell you one more thing about the skim is I included a little tape here of them talking about the skim because it was such a big deal, and it took most of the resources because it was such a big deal. In the end, they were taking $40,000 a month just from the Tropicana, and even more from the Stardust. So
the whole Spiro-Savella war really wasn't that big on their radar, if you will,
it was only part
once
of
they
their
stumbled
radar.
into this
Right.
other storyline.
It was primarily the Kansas City Police and the ATF and a couple of FBI agents that they could spare to help with that. But listen to this. I brought you just for your entertainment, and then we'll get back to the Spiro story about getting the skim. Go ahead and insert that in there.
I'll tell you the best way to get the money out of the slot. He said earlier, if they're going to have eventually have 1,000 slots.
It's so good. It's so lucrative. But I mean, look, see,
What can be, Carl? What the hell can be done?
well, we did it at August, and I think we can set it up again. You see, the cashier cage is here, and the slot machines work that bank out of the cashier cage, and it's under the controller. But if we can set up a separate bank and a separate counter for the slots with that scale, I think we can be making in a separate run. Because see, you can't, like those belts we're using are just no good. You can't get any serious money because the fucking things weigh so much. So when they take the silver dollars, they got to go around to different banks and cash them in. But when they have their own bank,
to your place.
well, it's no good, Joe, because how much fucking silver can a guy carry? See, when they go out to a guy's car and find a bag of silver, they know the guy's doing money. If a guy finds $3,000 on me in cash, I just carry $3,000. But we set our own bank up, Joe. You put $50,000 cash money in the slot bank.
You can do that.
Now, if they steal the silver, they turn it into cash.
Yeah, if they steal the silver, then they can turn it into cash. That guy talking was Carl Thomas. Carl Thomas was a Peckerwood, a non-Italian, who was a well-respected casino executive in Las Vegas at the time, and he had worked at the Stardust just before Lefty Rosenthal took it away from him and was sending the skim to Chicago, the Robert De Niro character. And Carl Thomas ended up working at the Tropicana, and that was the skim that Nick Savella had set up just for Kansas City. He shared a little bit with Chicago, but mainly it was for Kansas City.
But he was there talking with Joe Augusto.
Joe Augusto, who was another Kansas City guy who was working at the Tropicana, and they were telling Nick Savella, here's how we do it. They were discussing how you steal money from a casino. And Thomas, he obviously ran the whole thing. He had the ideas. And if you want to know a lot more about that, go get my movie, Gangland Wire. And you'll hear over half that movie is just how they skimmed from casinos, what they did with the money, how they tried to bribe politicians in Las Vegas. And, you know, I showed that movie out at Las Vegas recently, and I had a really good crowd and really good questions, and from people who had actually worked at those casinos and knew a lot of these people personally at the time. It was really an interesting post-film discussion. But I digress. Let's go back to the Spiro story. I just reminded you all that everybody's got their plates full. The FBI's got their plates full. Nick Savella and Tuffy and Luna, they got their plates full. They've got the skim going, and they've got the Spiros trying to kill them, and they're trying to kill the Spiros. And it's now May the 4th, 1979. And remember, the 1-year anniversary of the Tuffy killing Mike Spiro is coming up on May the 16th, I believe, and just a couple weeks. And Lyle Neal has called a meeting with Joe Spiro at Little Caesars Bar. Little Caesars is this bar owned by one of their buddies, Conrad Metz, and it's just real close, about a half a block from the Villa Capri, which is the Savella headquarters. So Neal is told at this meeting that the night before, Joe Spiro is at Little Caesars, and he sees Tuffy's car parked out in front. Well, he's got the remote control and the dynamite bomb, and so he takes it over and he places it underneath Tuffy's car in a brown paper sack. Joe returns back to Little Caesars and stands by the front door where he can see Tuffy's car, and he waits. Pretty soon, Tuffy exits the Villa Capri, and he enters his car. Joe, I can just see this now. Joe pushes the button, and it doesn't nothing happens. He pushes the button, nothing happens. I can just see it now. It's like trying to push a remote control on the TV, and the channel doesn't change. You just
like you keep pointing it at the.
Yeah, keep pointing it at it, and you push it, and you turn it this way and turn it that way, and you push it, and Tuffy calmly drives off. So play that Clark Metz-Baum interview. This is an interview with Clark Hamilton, who worked this case.
This was the officer.
Mm-hmm. Detective
Lyle
Clark
Neal
Hamilton
was present with Conrad Metz and Joe Spiro, and they joked about it at first, waiting for Mr. DeLuna to come out. And then after it happened, not all of them were upset. Joe was upset that it didn't work and indicated that they would have to run a test if something went wrong, and they had no idea what was causing the problem. I believe Conrad Metz went up and picked the bomb up, which was in the paper sack.
Well, that's interesting. Now, Joe didn't go back and pick the bomb up. I mean, think about it. You got a bunch of dynamite, and there's something wrong with the mechanism. You got to go pick that sack up full of about 8. I think it was about 8 sticks in that particular bomb. Pick it up and carry it back down to your place. But I guess he's a man, and
he went and did that.
And he went and did that. Yes,
even though he didn't know it could go off.
Hey, it could have gone off any time. A passing police car could key their mic and send out the right signal and make it go off. So.
And Lyle Neal, he's there?
He's not there. He just told about this story the next day. And so he turns around and reports it to Clark, and that's what Clark, in his he was telling about what Lyle Neal told him about this failed attempt to get the bomb go off. And Lyle Neal by now is really frantic.
Did they ever figure out why the bomb didn't go off?
Yeah, they did. They figure out they're going the antenna. They were a little too far away, and they needed to have a longer antenna on the receiving device and get a little closer. And so,
which is kind of dangerous if you got
sure,
8 sticks of dynamite.
Sure, and these guys, like I said, they're not the sharpest tools in the toolbox. And so. But
and somebody like Tuffy DeLuna, he knows what they look like.
Yeah, sure, he does. He knows exactly what they look like, and they're in the joint just down the street from where Tuffy is, and yeah, he's known them all their lives, and they've known Tuffy all their lives. They all grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools, and things like that. So, but they take the bomb, and Joe takes it out, and he figures out that he got to be closer to get this done. And, of course, the ATF's on board by this time, and there's a huge task force, a surveillance crew, an investigative crew, and surveillance crew is trying to keep track of Joe Spiro and Conrad Metz, and Clark is trying to pick up tidbits from Lyle Neal all the time about what they're doing, where they're going, and they also know there's a time, we're coming up on the 1-year date, within 2 weeks, the 1-year date of when Mike was killed, and Joe wants this done by that time. He'd like to do it on that day, as it turned out, but and they also know, and this is another problem, is they know that Carl Spiro's involved, and they want to take down everybody, and they want to recover the bomb. You don't want to leave the bomb on the street, and you want to get Carl Spiro, but right now there's only hearsay evidence.
But Carl Spiro's usually insulated because he's having Joe do it.
Right. Joe has told Lyle Neal. They know Lyle Neal will testify by now, so they've got Joe. But you need more than just a testimony of an informant. You need some solid evidence. You need that bomb. You need some guns. You need some surveillance that shows that he is trying to kill Tuffy DeLuna, that he's moving toward him, and then you take him off with guns, or you need overt acts, not just planning. And so they don't know where the bomb is. Lyle Neal does not know.
Not enough for Lyle Neal as a snitch to tell you that they had made an attempt and it failed.
Not enough. You need some collaborating evidence, as we say in the legal world. So and they really needed to recover that bomb and get it off the street. Did not want to leave it on the street. And they knew that even if they could make a case on Joe, he wasn't going to rat out Carl. He was never going to testify against his own brother. So these are pretty tense surveillances, and because they're running around with the bomb, you don't know exactly where it is. Lyle Neal doesn't know exactly where it is. You can't trust Lyle Neal either. He's telling J.D. one thing and Clark another thing, and he's running his own escort service and making money of his own because he's got cover now, and he'll be out and doing some drug deals of his own. So, May 15th, the next day is the date that, and 1 year anniversary of when Mike was killed. May 15th, Joe Spiro calls Lyle Neal and asks him to meet him at a diner in the East Bottoms in Kansas City. And the East Bottoms of Kansas City is a industrial area, and a lot of truck lines have their docks down there. Joe had worked down there on a truck dock for a long time, and Teamsters kind of own that operations, railroad tracks, and so railroad people and Teamsters are the only people really down there. Small, kind of down at the heels neighborhood, but primarily truck docks and railroad train tracks. Joe Spiro had worked at one of these docks as a Teamster, and Lyle Neal's given a recording device, and the meeting is observed by surveillance. And in this conversation, Spiro tells Neal the problems with the antenna on the bomb being too short, and he wants to do one more test, and he said, I'll do this the next day, and that's the anniversary of his brother's death, and he maybe do it that next night. So he instructs Lyle Neal to come to his residence the next morning, May the 16th, and pick him up. Well, this is getting really tense because
now it is the 16th. It's the anniversary of the death.
Right. The very next day, and Lyle Neal's been ordered to come and pick Joe Spiro up at his house, and he wants to test the bomb. So Lyle Neal knows he's going to get to see the bomb, and he's going to know where it is, but we don't know how this is going to go down. He may go find the bomb with Lyle and then go set it and try to set it off, and it's happening too fast. And Lyle Neal's nervous, and so is the surveillance crew, because they're the ones that are close. And upper management and the police department, ATF, are nervous because nobody wants to screw this up and have an accidental bombing, in a public place. And,
how do you deal with that?
It's tough.
I mean, they have the bomb. They're going to try to do it. You can keep an eye on the Savellas or Tuffy DeLuna, and you can keep an eye on Joe Spiro.
You try to.
Because they know they're being followed.
And if you lock down on him too close, he's going to know he's being followed and just blow the whole thing off.
Yeah.
So what do? You try to get the helicopter up. The helicopter works sometimes it doesn't work. and you try to get a beeper on this car, and
something you can
sometimes
track the
that
vehicle
works, and
with.
sometimes it doesn't work. The beeper back then, we called it the hound dog, and it was a radio tracking device, and you would use a magnet and put it up underneath on the frame of the car, and it had a short antenna. Now, if the guy just leaned over, if he happened to look underneath his car,
he'd see the
antenna hanging down, and it just sent out a radio signal, and you had to have a car that had a triangulating device on it, and you could just kind of tell what general direction they were going. And if they went at right angles to you, you'd see they were going at right angles to you. And many times you'd lose them for a little bit, and then you just start crisscrossing the area of the last place you knew they were. I remember, I'll tell you one story, quick story about that. We were following a guy with a beeper one night, and we lost him, and we couldn't find him anywhere, and shift was over, and we'd expended all of our overtime for that night, and we just went on home. And the next night we came in, and we started crisscrossing the city where he might be, and we finally picked up a signal, and we honed in on it. It was in an industrial area, and there wasn't anybody around, but yet the car had to be there somewhere, and we walked right up to where it should be, and there wasn't anything there. But all of a sudden, one of the guys looked in, there was a window, and it was a body shop.
And inside the body shop,
there was the car sitting there to be worked on. And it had the beeper on it. So we were trying to figure, we got to get that beeper off there, because if they put it up on the rack, they're going to find it. If they go underneath it, they're going to find it. So the first idea was, we'll just get a big trash can and break out the plate glass window in the front, run in and grab the beeper and run off with it. So we call the sergeant, and the sergeant calls the captain, who were both at home asleep in bed, because this is about 4 o'clock. I wasn't 4 o'clock. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. And
you couldn't just do this.
Well, we didn't do that. They cooler heads prevailed. That was just the first idea. So we brainstormed, and Sergeant Bill Trollope, smartest guy I ever worked for. He was really a creative, great investigator, and a creative guy, had good ideas. And he said, he calls me up back on the phone. He said, Gary, he said, don't do anything. He said, the Captain Patterson and I are on our way in. So they got together and they came in, and he gets there and he tells me, he said, here's what you do. He said, you go down to a payphone down the street and you call up the dispatcher and tell them that you looked in and you thought you saw somebody duck behind one of the cars in there, and then hang up. And so lo and behold, about 10 minutes, I did that, and about 10, 15 minutes later, a police car shows up. So Sergeant Trollope and Captain Patterson show up with the police car, and they say, well, what's going on, officer? We're off duty, and we're just driving by here. And they said, oh, well, we got a call on a suspicious party. And so they say, well, let's, I don't see anything in there. It doesn't look like any evidence of anybody being in there. Well, maybe you ought to call and see if they've got a building listing on this business.
Yeah, wouldn't they be able to find out who owned it?
Right. And so if you were a legitimate business, you fill out a building listing card and give it to the police, and then they have a contact number for anything that happens in the middle of the night. So they got the officer to call the dispatcher. If they hadn't been there, the officer probably would have just said, oh, I don't see anything, and went on. But
because the captain was there.
The captain and the sergeant are there, and they say, hey, here's an idea. Let's do that. So they call the owner at home, get him to come in. Well, the plan was that they go in and search out the building with the owner. He'll let them in. They'll go search the building. Captain Patterson, he was supposed to keep the owner busy and get him away from the car, and Billy Trollope was going to go slide underneath the car and grab the hound dog off underneath the car. And the sergeant hit it off with the guy talking about fishing and hunting or golf. I don't remember which. He was interested in those things too. And so he got the guy steered away and got him into another part of the garage. And the captain had to crawl underneath the car and grab it and get it off the car. And once he got it, then they said, well, looks like there's nobody here. Sorry about that. And went on. So,
but this was a legitimate business owner.
Yeah, he was a legitimate. He was going to work on the car.
The car was a car that
was a car owned by a thief, a professional thief that we were following.
Was it a boosted car?
No, it was.
He actually registered the car.
Yeah, it was just a legitimate car that he stole. I mean, he stole that he bought, and what he actually ended up doing, and we followed him, and we saw him watching a golf warehouse place that mainly seemed to have golf carts. But what we didn't know, inside there's a whole lot of golf equipment, and we followed him for like a month, and we caught him out there looking around this place, but not right on it. We just knew he was sitting out by it, but we didn't know what he was looking at. Finally, after a while, you just got to give these things up. You don't know if you've been burned or what the deal is. Turned out we weren't burnt. We gave it up and went on, and about 2 or 3 weeks after that, they had a big burglary, and tens of thousands of dollars of golf equipment, golf clubs and balls were stolen.
Most likely by this guy.
Most likely by this guy, and we actually learned a few months later that they were fenced through a mob guy named Jimmy Ciarelli, and so you win some, you lose some, and some get rained out.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be pretty tough to come on, like just rolling up on a golf course, open up the trunk, and say, "You want to buy some of these 9-irons?"
No, they had the mob guy had some kind of a place, a legitimate kind of an outlet that would then buy this stuff real cheap. And there's places like that all over any major city will have places that will buy stolen stuff and they buy it cheap enough. But anyhow, so that was, here's where we are. We've got the anniversary of Mike Sparrow's death. Lyle Neal has got to go pick up Joe Sparrow. He knows he's got the bomb. We don't know where it is. We've got to stop this. And so come back next week or whenever you get the next podcast for exciting conclusion. And Lyle Neal will probably get the fright of his miserable existence with his bomb. And Joe will expose his real plan. And his real plan is a very dangerous plan. And the chief of police and the ATF supervising agent and all the upper management people are nervous as hell, but they're on a railroad train they can't get off of. So,
well, this is still really 2 days before the anniversary.
This is the night before.
The night before
the anniversary, and Joe has made announcements that he would like to do this on the anniversary, if no later than that. So that's where we are, and That's where we'll be next time, and we will finish up this exciting story. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Gary Jenkins.
So go to www.ganglandwire.com and read my organized crime blog, buy my movie, and
download the app.
Download the app from the app stores, the Kansas City Mob Tour, and visit Big Dumb Fun Show once in a while, too, for the most recent independent music and film information.
Now, this is actually episode 4.
Yes, it is.
Of a 5-episode series.
5 episodes. We've got one more episode.
Obviously, there's 3 other episodes people can download as well.
Correct.
That will bring them right up to and through episode 4. It's Gangland Wire. True crime stories with retired Intelligence Unit Detective Gary Jenkins.